We're pleased to be here, and as Mary Jane indicated, I think one of the things that should be kind of maybe an unintended consequence of this gathering is that we really do need to do a better job at sharing the work that we've done. We can't all keep starting and repeating work that maybe is already done. So you can take anything I have and tweak it and make it your own. There's no hard feelings if you revise most of it. But some of the charts and timelines and information we've had to do from scratch. So we have a lot of PowerPoint presentations with training notes that I think it would behoove us as a state to really start to look at a repository that can collect that so that we can share the work that we're doing. So the purpose of our presentation today is to share the first phase of our Common Core State Standards Professional Development offerings. And that really grounded where we now are going to go with Common Core curricular alignment and the professional development around that as we move forward. So the first thing I'm going to have you do, we've got a couple of activities so that you're moving around a little bit, or thinking a little bit, even if you're not physically moving. I think one thing that we probably all can agree on is that whether you're thinking about the state or you're thinking about your own district, it's often difficult to get everybody on the same page at the same time, right? So in order to kind of set your mindset around that, I'm going to do an activity with you. So for those of you that are ELA, you're going to need a paper and a piece of pencil, because it's going to be a math exercise, okay? So I want all of you to think of a number 1 through 9. And then I want you to multiply that number by 9. Then I want you to add the digits together and subtract 5. Okay, now my ELA people can kick in. Take that number that you're ended up with and assign it a letter. So A is equivalent to 1, B is 2, C is 3, etc. Now I want you to think of a country that starts with that letter. I'll give us more time. We good? Take the last letter of that country and think of a land animal, so nothing in the water, a land animal that begins with that letter. The last letter of your country, think of a land animal that begins with that letter. Okay? Now I want you to think of a color that starts with the letter of that land animal. Okay? Now, how many of you in the room? Yes, ma'am. The color starts with the first letter of your land animal. First letter. So I'm going to repeat all of this so that we're all square. You got a number 1 to 9. You multiplied by 9. You added those digits together and subtracted 5. You took that number and you assigned it a letter, A being 1, B being 2, etc. And you're going to think of a country that starts with that letter. Take the last letter of that country and think of a land animal that starts with that last letter. And now think of a color that starts with the first letter of your animal. Okay? Now by a show of hands, how many in the room have an orange kangaroo from Denmark? Wow. Wow. Okay. So according to the website, right, Mind Games, 98% of you really should have come up with an orange kangaroo from Denmark. I said it wrong? The last letter of the country, think of a land animal that starts with the last letter, and then think of a color starting with the letter of the land animal. So now how many of you have an orange kangaroo from Denmark? Okay, that makes it feel better. Okay, so the whole point of that is that we can take different paths, right, and still get to the end result. So we're going to present for you kind of the path that we took that may look and be very different than the path that you've taken. But as we're embarking on this thing called Common Core, we're like trailblazers, right? And we're all looking to each other for experts to be able to assist that with the implementation and the PD around Common Core. And we've got the parameters, but we all could and will get to that finish line, but perhaps taking a different path. Doesn't make us right and you wrong, just makes it look a little bit different, okay? So when we rolled out and decided to look at how we were going to add Common Core into already a lot of initiatives that were existing in Hillsborough County, we wanted to be very, very intentional. We could not have Common Core appear to be this other layer, this other thing that was now going to happen to the teachers and the staffs in Hillsborough County, ultimately the students. So we had to look at the initiatives that we had, and we purposely connected, intertwined our Common Core state standard implementation and idea around that into the new evaluation instrument that we're all living. So we're completing our third year of the evaluation instrument, and I know many of you know a lot of that was kick-started because of the Great Gates Grant. But let me assure you that the Gates Grant doesn't and didn't fund an awful lot of what we're doing. It just kick-started us. A lot of front-loaded activities because we had dollars to go with that. So we looked after having a full year of that implementation of the evaluation and saw that over 60% of our teachers, and the evaluation rubric that Hillsborough chose was a Charlotte Danielson type rubric. Domain 3 is that teaching and learning domain. And over 60% of our teachers were falling in the developing, or that third level of that rubric. So it was a great place for us to say the standards are now going to be the assistance that you need in order to pull that up. The evaluation already got our teachers focusing on not what they were doing, but how the students were learning. So embedding the Common Core and rolling it out through that domain made it more palatable and connected a lot more dots for us than if we just said, okay, we've got this new set of standards. We also ensured that it connected to the district strategic plan, right? So all of you have your strategic plan. We were intentional in our PowerPoints and in our conversation and in the language that we used to make sure that it connected to our district plan. And all of the components to the Empowering Effective Teachers work, which was the evaluation, the dashboard, the professional development around it, all helped this connection. So now I'm going to have my colleague Lynn Doherty start to walk us through specifically what that looked like.
So good morning. What we are sharing with you is the actual orientation that we've done with all of our teachers, K through 12. So as we said, this is our version. You may have your own version, and I hope at some point during the time today that we'll be able to share how we've approached this and learn from each other. So we began the conversation with our teachers with an orientation to the Common Core standards. So we've spent a fair amount of time laying a very deep foundation for our teachers in the compelling why behind the Common Core standards, and then talking about the standards themselves before we actually introduced a lot of the curriculum alignment. And we found that that's been very successful because as the teachers begin the curriculum alignment, after having had some time to really converse and think about the standards, what they bring to us, what the expectations are, and what they look like, they were much more prepared to deliver in the classrooms those curriculum realignment pieces that were put in place. So we just really did start with a kind of overview of the fact that the Common Core standards, of course, were adopted in Florida in June of 2010, and that they give us a very strong foundation for developing our teacher support tools. Again, as Winnie said, we're connecting it to our teacher evaluation as tightly as we can as a support system for those teachers who are wanting to grow, and they all want to grow, even our teachers in the exemplary ranges. So our district's first step is to understand the Common Core State Standards instructional expectations for math, for ELA, and for the content literacy standards. And our next steps after that, as we talked with the teachers in this beginning piece, were to identify our instructional approaches and our strategies and our materials, so that we weren't starting with programs, we weren't starting with handing them things to go teach, so that we were really wanting them to understand, invest, and be experts in the understanding of those Common Core expectations. So we were very focused on delivering instruction after this foundational piece. So here's a little bit of it. They said, make this interactive, 250 people. So we actually do this with our teachers. When we do work across the district, and as you do too, you know, it's important for the folks in the room to know a little bit about each other. So we start with I've got to be me, I've got to be me. And I would like, if you would, to please stand up if you've been in education for less than 5 years. Wow. If you have been in education for 6 to 10 years. A few more. Wonderful. If you've been in education for 11 to 20 years. And here's a big group. 21 to 30 years. Wow. And then for those of us who still stand, over 30 years. So as we looked around the room and we stood up very briefly to share a little bit about our longevity in our career field, we have to recognize in our schools, in our districts, and at the state level, so the delighted piece about this is that we're together today to do this, is to look at those various experiences and perceptions that we bring as a result of those experiences. So just a little bit more of just like me. How many of you are a teacher and administrator in the same district where you attended school yourself? How many of you, and this is growing from where we started, how many of you have ever tweeted? Tweeters. Look at that.
I have tweeted, so there you go. The old words.
We were at a convening of a group of educators with looking at the literacy design collaborative models, and before we actually got to register, we had to register to tweet, which was an experience for me. But I was 2. How many of you have ever Skyped or Tangoed, and I'm not talking fancy stars, or used any face-to-face video chat? Look around the room. So thank you very much. Our movement into the future, as we all know, looks very different. Common Core is certainly defining that. And now we need to talk about our students' college and career ready. So before we think about that, I'm going to share with you some of the kids' perspectives. We practiced this morning about 10 times. Shane? would you take just a moment individually? So we're not going to share at this point. You'll have the opportunity to share. What does it mean to you as an educator where you're positioned now to prepare our students for the future? Just take a brief moment. What does it mean to you right now as an educator in the place you're at to prepare our students for our future? You could write that little thought down, and then we'll come back and share it. Once you have your thought down, if you could just kind of set that off to the side for just a moment. And we're going to visit our essential questions for the bulk of our presentation. So today, our purpose is to understand the reasoning behind college and career readiness, what are Common Core state standards and how they will impact our instruction and assessment, how we are getting our students ready, and how the work of the Common Core state standards will be rolled out. So those are the guiding questions for our initial orientation with our teachers. So let's start with the first essential question, and that's related to what is the reasoning behind college and career ready. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and I'm going to ask you to reflect with a partner at the table. So find someone that you can look deeply into their eyes and share your thoughts. So I'm going to reflect with your partner, if you would reflect with your partner, your definition of the college and career ready means. And then I'm going to pace you through some additional thinking. So just start with your definition of what you wrote down with your colleague about what college and career readiness means. So from what you believe college and career readiness is, why do you now believe that this has become such a driving force in our school reform issues? You'll continue your conversation. College and career readiness always been an important focus for our education system. So talk a minute with your neighbor about your experiences with that focus to date on college and career readiness. Hasn't it always been a focus for us? I don't know. Have a conversation. do you feel is the reason behind the college and career readiness urgency? Take just another moment. All of our stakeholders, our teachers, our administrators, trying to activate a little bit of their own personal experience, their thinking, their belief system as we move into this, because we very much believe in a collaborative process. So this is not something done to our teachers and our students, but that we value their thinking and the experience that they bring to the table and their understanding. So it's engaged for us at this point.
And I think the reason we chose this path, lots of our teachers wanted us to provide more of what they would consider the stuff, but getting everybody to understand where we were and why we were moving forward was critical. It helped some of the comments that I think folks made to the commissioner about, you know, how do we engage those teachers? We can't do it to them, we have to do it with them. So be thinking as you're seeing this presentation, we did this K-12, K-12 for all of our teachers, and it was really based on getting them to understand the why. And then what does it look like?
So then we began to layer in some of the information that we know about various components related to college and career readiness. And we began with this information that I think all of us are very familiar with. So I'm going to move us through some of the statistics pretty quickly. But with our teachers, we spent some time talking about this and their understanding. I think most of us know, and across the nation, this is the statistics bear out, that about 42% of our new four-year college students and about 49% of our students in two-year institutions are taking remedial courses in the past due to some inadequate high school preparation. So as a result of that, we all know that the FLDOE created and developed some course standards and descriptions for what college elective courses might look like. And our legislature stepped up and said that we, in the 2011 state law, need to assess our students in the 11th grade with the PERT. And that from that information, we would determine who needed some additional support in their senior year. And so those courses developed by the DOE came into play to allow us to offer that remediation in the senior year, hopefully, looking at the statistics that we have on the screen, hopefully helping our students to be able to enter those 2- and 4-year university course credit-bearing experiences. So, did you know that 46% of recent high school graduates with no further education are inadequately prepared for the work habits that they'll need on the job? And this comes from Rising to the Challenge research piece from the Achieve group. And so they surveyed a group of employers and students about the preparation to attend post-secondary or immediately enter the workforce. So it was a group of both students who went directly to work and students who went on to some additional education. It was a self-reporting process that they went through. And basically the outcomes were that most of the folks that were reporting felt that they were unable to meet expectations in reading, communications, math, or writing. And that was both the students and the employers. And that our employers particularly felt that the students lacked social and interpersonal skills. So when you think about the Common Core expectations, and it is the academic as well as the ability to communicate, we know that we have some work to do. So then we talk about the definition of what does it mean to be college and career ready. And we made some, I think, major ahas with a lot of our groups that we worked with. And the idea of college ready kind of takes two paths as we talk with our teachers and our administrators. To be college ready means to be prepared for that traditional 2- and 4-year college and or training experiences to earn certifications or licenses. To be ready for college, however, was a different aspect of view. Academic and communication skills needed for success in a 2- or 4-year college without taking remedial courses. So it demanded that higher level of academic knowledge. So as we started to think about as a district, what does college readiness mean, it was really important for us to define that for our teachers and for ourselves as we began that process of curriculum realignment and understanding the standards. And then we talked about career readiness. And the career readiness is now defined as being able to earn a salary to support a family of 4 with benefits and an opportunity for promotion, or not a poverty level. And if you look at some of the workforce data, poverty level is oftentimes about what our beginning teachers make. So that always has a huge impact with them because they are, kind of comparing to themselves. So again, in another study done by the Achieve group, what is college and career ready? They surveyed a group again. 49% went into the workforce feeling that they were unprepared to meet the work habits. The students that were queried felt they had gaps in science. 51% of the students who responded felt they had gaps in science. Oral communication speaking, 46% of the surveyed group felt they had gaps. In mathematics, 41% of the group felt they had gaps. Writing skills, 38%. And reading and understanding complicated materials, 33% of the group. So overall, half of this group that was surveyed felt that they were not prepared to meet the work habits that were being demanded of them. Of that same group, 84% felt that they needed more training prior to beginning their careers. And here was the one that kind of hit me between the eyes. And as hindsight is always better. 77% of them would have welcomed raised standards and expectations. So as they, began their work careers, that recognition that they were not as well prepared and would have appreciated being pushed a little harder and more expectations was very clear to them. So our college and career ready, the same thing. 35 years ago, only 12% of our U.S. jobs required some post-secondary training, and only 16% required a bachelor's degree. So we're really thinking about the value of our high school diploma as we kind of ponder those statistics. And across the board, it pretty much shows in our research that the high school diploma value declined dramatically over the past 50 years when you think about that college and career readiness expectation. In the 1950s, we had about 50% of our jobs that were unskilled. So a high school graduate or even a dropout could successfully begin a career and be able to successfully support families or themselves. In 2005, so 35 years or so later, 14% of our jobs were unskilled. So we dropped almost 35% points, I guess, from 50% to 14% in the number of unskilled jobs that were available in 2005. So our students absolutely, as when the survey showed, understand that they were not leaving school prepared for the job market because those unskilled jobs were not there. So I'm going to ask you to share a question. How do you prepare our high school students for jobs and careers that don't exist? How do you prepare them for jobs or careers that don't exist? We can't conceptualize. Take a moment at your table with your partner. additional thoughts. Our college and career ready is the same thing. Nearly 8 in 10 future jobs in the next decade in the United States will require post-secondary education or training. That 45% will be sort of a middle-level occupation, which requires at least some post-secondary education training. And we have clearly linked it to our career and technical education course of studies to bring them into that process of thinking what is their role in preparing our students for college and career readiness and integrating the Common Core content standards into their work. That there are the high-need, high-wage careers that are in that mid-level, 45%. 33% will be high-skilled occupations for which a bachelor's degree or higher is required. Some additional thoughts that we kind of share with our folks is only 22% of future job openings will be low skill and accessible to those with a high school diploma or less. And kind of moving to a global perspective. So as we've talked, we've kind of delved into a little bit of your own personal thinking about college and career readiness. We've shared some statistics from Florida and from the nation. And now looking at it in a global perspective, the U.S. still ranks third in the adult population of 25 to 64-year-olds with an associate degree or higher among 30 countries. And we now rank 10th among the 25 to 34-year-olds with a 2-year degree and above. So competing countries are catching up with us and even outpacing us in the U.S. and the educational attainment of the new generation of adults. So again, to take a moment, I'm going to begin to think now about instruction. So in your experience, what's the current academic expectations in your educational arena for all students, ELL, ESE, general ed students? What is that academic expectation for all of our students? And we talk with our teachers about it not being perceived, but the actual expectation. Because we all have a thing that we say, but when it closes the door, we close the door and we begin to teach. What is that expectation for all of our students? If you'll take just a moment and share it with your partners. We shift a bit from the compelling why of the information about what is Common Core addressing in terms of college and career, what is some of the data that we've collected, and there's so much out there that comes every day into our email boxes about this type of topic. We wanted to set that very thoughtful conversation about why Common Core, why college and career ready, before we began the discussion about the momentum behind the Common Core standards. So a lot of this, again, is information that is very basic at this point for a lot of folks, but it may be something new for some of our teachers. So the Common Core state standards provided an equal opportunity based on clear expectations and international benchmarks. And the Common Core state standards provides those shared goals and expectations. So the expectations are for students, are clear for students, for parents, and for our general public. That's our first driving force behind the Common Core standards, is that clear expectation. That we encourage the development of textbooks, digital media, and other teaching tools. That we unite as a nation, participating in Common Core, to think about the types of tools that we put in front of the kids. That we develop and implement a comprehensive assessment system, which of course we're doing with the 2 consortiums. And then to evaluate policy changes, and that's what Dr. Bennett talked a little bit about today. needed to help our students and our educators to meet those standards. So having that very clear set of standards that we and expectations that we all acknowledge allows us to move forward in those other areas in a much faster and more efficient fashion. So we share a little bit about the development of the Common Core standards, and we all know that the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State Officers were part of it, and it's supported by Achieve and ACT, as Dr. Bennett talked about a little bit. And then we also talk with our administrators and our teachers about the public comment opportunities that they're given, and that they need to really pay attention to those, because our voices are critical in this process as the experts in education. The criteria used to develop Common Core is shared with our professional development group as well, and they're very, I think, much a part of the work we all do now. Fewer, clearer, higher, aligned with college and career work expectations, include rigorous content and application of knowledge through higher order skills, that they are internationally benchmarked, and that they're realistic and practical for the classroom. And we really drive that point home as we begin then the next phase of our professional development that we'll share with you in a moment. And that they're consistent across all participating states. So we spend some time talking with our stakeholders about the criteria used to develop it. And then we talk them through a graphic, because some folks appreciate the graphic version of it more, that the standards are divided into ELA math and 612 literacy. And we begin that conversation about what the actual standard document looks like. So it's imperative for our teachers and our administrators to learn that text organization, that they actually dig into the document.
The 17,000 teachers that Hillsborough County has across about 240 schools, that basis, that orientation, every one of them goes through at the same, so that everybody's on that same page as we talked about, along with our administrators. So now we're going to get into a little bit more of how we're implementing that plan.
So our second essential question was readiness, and how we, as a district, we're getting ready to implement the Common Core state standards. So what we talk about is the initiatives that over the last 5 years we have implemented. So typically they're very clear, and they can shout those out for us because they live them every day. You may have similar initiatives in your district as well. So we then talk about how do those initiatives address the need of all students. So if you could take just a moment, again at your table, talk about some of the initiatives that you've seen implemented in your districts over the past 5 years, and how that's impacted education for all students. Some of our initiatives certainly have included the shift in teacher evaluation. How many of you have experienced that? Everybody? Teacher evaluation. We have some curriculum pieces that were implemented that were major shifts with our college board work from Springboard. So our teachers bring that up and talk about that as a major shift and initiative. So we have multiple initiatives that we are wanting to get out on the table so that we can talk about how Common Core supports and integrates into those initiatives and not layered on top of that. So I'm going to ask you to do one more brainstorming, if you would. If you, at your table, can develop a very short list of what you would consider principles for learning. If you ruled the world, what would your principles of learning be in your environment? So I'll give you an example. In our administrative school center on the 4th floor, which is curriculum instruction, for many years we had large gold block letters that said, reading is the foundation of all academic learning. That's a principle for us. We felt that reading was the foundation and is the foundation of all academic learning. So at your table, see if you can discuss and come up with a short list of what your principles of learning would be. And now I'm going to ask you to compare them to the Common Core foundations that they worked from in terms of defining the standards. So their first principle of learning in the development of the Common Core was being literate is at the heart of learning in every subject, that learning is a social act, that learning about learning establishes a habit of inquiry important in lifelong learning. Assessing programs is a part of learning. That learning includes turning information into knowledge using multiple media. And that learning occurs in a global context. So if you think back to what the surveys and the studies were telling us about how the kids felt they were being prepared and what they lacked when they got into the career fields or they got to the 2 or 4-year college experiences, very much the principles of learning that Common Core is based on addresses those concerns that are raised by that type of statistics. So it focuses us on the answers, perhaps, to that, what is college and career ready. We think a little bit about the Common Core state standards and how they're good for students, that they do focus us on that college and career ready definition, that they are consistent across states and for all kids, not being dependent on a student's zip code. And we talk about the zip code situation of being, some students get better opportunities in their particular schools than others. So based on the culture of kindness that sometimes we build for certain students where we worry about whether they can or cannot do, so we lower those expectations. The Common Core standards are consistent expectations for all of our students. It addresses our mobility issue, and it helps our kids with those transitions from states. How many of you have moved with your children more than once from one state to another, one district to another? Mobility is a huge issue for a lot of our students. And that student ownership is involved. The clear standards will help students understand what is expected of them and allow for more self-directed learning. So that whole global competition piece comes into play as we talk about what's good for students. We're a very large district, so a lot of our, and traditionally a lot of our students would compete with each other for jobs. Now we're competing globally, so our Plant City kids are competing for jobs with kids in Indonesia. So that global competition piece comes into play as we look at the PISA measuring the reading, the math, and the science and literacy pieces. So it allows us to participate on that same playing field. Why is it good for educators? Winnie talked a little bit about the connection to our Empowering Effective Teachers teacher evaluation. It certainly focuses on the same things that are measured on the Empowering Effective teacher evaluation rubric. Provides us clear goals. It helps our teachers develop and implement strategies, tools, and materials. And it is the foundation of our EET toolkit. So looking at that domain 3, which is the learning piece, that Winnie referenced earlier. They are evaluated on student engagement, higher order questioning and discussion techniques, use of assessment to align instruction, and then ensuring that the success of all students. And compare that to Common Core, and you have almost a word-for-word match in terms of expectations. So our third essential question we talk about is the actual rollout and how the work of the Common Core rollout will happen. And we very much link this to our current effective teachers, where we have high instructional expectations in our teacher rubric, and that cycles into the Common Core state standards, increase student achievement expectations. So we link it to that empowered effective teachers. As we kind of wrap up the conversation with our administrators and teachers, we talk about the backwards design, that our new tests and assessments will be tied to Common Core, that they will be computer-based, which shifts some of the playing field for our students, and they will be given at specific times during the year, that they'll be more focused on application, that we're a governing state, which is one of the two consortiums, so we talk a little bit about the assessment pieces, and that the piloting of the items actually did begin in 2012 through 2013. So with this beginning, with the end in mind as a district, we met with a team of about 55 stakeholders from, Dr. Greenberg was there from the state. We had parents there. We had the teacher union teachers, administrators from various folks. We looked at our strengths, we looked at our weaknesses, and kind of went through a levered exercise to create a multi-year plan. So we very much went into it with a phase approach of what do we begin with, what do we go to next, and then what's the third piece, fourth piece, and ongoing. And there is our timeline that walks you through to 2014-15, our implementation status, where we are, as you are, fully implemented in K-1. We're working on our 2.5, 6.12 content literacy this year. We'll be fully implemented in 6.12 ELA and math, as well as the K-5 and the 6.12 content literacy next year. And looking forward to that 2014-15 common assessment piece. And as you go down that slide, you'll see what our instructional supports are, what our technology supports are, and what our stakeholder communication is. So those are the big pieces of the plan that we have divided into phases of implementation. So as we're thinking about, where do we go next? We looked at where the Common Core standards came from. We talked about the importance of understanding deeply what the standards tell us about expectations. We've created a plan, and now we need to really think about the students a bit. 16 children you saw are the 16 digital natives. So to share a quote with you from Peter Smith, from the Catering to the 21st Century Learner, which appeared in Forbes magazine. Navigating the obstacles of supporting the needs of these 21st century learners includes understanding and respecting the potential of the new ecology of learning that information technology in an increasingly wireless world is creating. The learning possibility has moved beyond making time and place-bound access available on school campuses only. The increasing capacity of the World Wide Web has revolutionized our ability to manage learning and assessment. And in many of our cases, we know our students have moved beyond that thinking of that time-bound, location-bound education. So our challenge in looking at the Common Core standards is to think very deeply about those expectations and then to make decisions, wise decisions, about our curriculum and the direction we go, thinking outside of those traditional boundaries.
So I hope that the presentation, this particular PowerPoint, helps you see that in Hillsborough we took a little bit of an attitude of going slow to go fast. So we had, this presentation is actually the second one that we do for all. And then once I get the teachers at that same place and on the same page, using the same language and our administrators, then we really started to dive in with our other trainings around what we call applying the standards, deepening the standards. There's a series of trainings that we do to take them deeper and really unpacking it, and what does that mean for me in the classroom. But I think it was important for us, at least we felt that based on that group, the group of 55 that Stu is a part of, and so is Teresa Sweet, that they really felt that we need to message this the same way, so that everybody is at the same starting point. And then obviously as we start to get into our content areas, which right now I said we went slow to go fast and we're sprinting, you know, rather fast at this point, because we know that 2014 is looming for us. So in our presentation this afternoon, we'll take you really specifically into the implementation and some of those other trainings. But as Mary Jane said, we provided a couple of PowerPoints to her that we've done and felt that this was a good place to start. And we'll leave you with one more clip.
So we very much address all of our work, but everyone has a viewer perspective, and it's important for us to communicate about that learning. So what you just experienced was the first piece of information about Common Core that we rolled out, and we wanted to encourage their learning and questioning as a result of that. So Zoom and resume is, I think, a really interesting way of looking at perspective. So follow along if you will. So the view may be very different along our pathway depending on where you are, but it's all about the perspective and understanding where you are in that journey. And we are committed to helping our teachers understand that we are there to support them on that journey. So I appreciate very much your time and attention this morning. It's just a big clip, but thank you.